Sports tonight on this Wednesday night in the Mile High City. He's Andrew Mason. I'm Will Peterson. We'll roll with you for the next hour. Busy day in Broncos country. Sean Payton meets the media. Jarrett Stidham meets the media. And Mace, we'll start with a little bit of breaking news. It's actually good news for the Broncos. In a year, we haven't had a lot of good news. Literally within the last 30 seconds or so, we have learned the Pro Bowlers, yours truly, Andrew Mason, had a report on this just a few minutes ago. So I'll let you get settled in here. I know you're confirming all this news, but we've got 3 Pro Bowlers for the Broncos, and they are all starters. This is actually a pleasant surprise in my eyes.
Yeah, and it makes sense, though. I mean, Marvin Mims Jr., Justin Simmons, and Pat Surtain. And you can say this, is this season as good as some others have been for Justin Simmons? Maybe not at the same level, but he played well, especially early on in the season, getting a bunch of picks. And safety certainly is a position where reputation does help, and Justin Simmons' reputation league-wide is very high. So he's a starter. Pat Surtain is a starter, and despite the last couple of weeks, especially since he had that little knee tweak that he had against the Texans, it's been a very good season by and large for Pat Surtain. And then Marvin Mims Jr., I mean, you're talking about somebody who's putting together kind of a historic season in terms of his average per punt return. That is also a no-brainer. And I think also when some of these votes come in, it simply is looking and saying, okay, who's leading in punt returns? Oh, there's Marvin Mims Jr. That gets my vote. So 3 Pro Bowlers, a couple of third alternates, Quinn Miners and Michael Burton, although now that it's the Pro Bowl games rather than an actual football game, you generally don't see it get to the third alternate most years. So that doesn't mean, so I don't expect it would get to where Quinn Miners and Michael Burton are in the mix for that event in Orlando.
We saw the numbers on the fan voting earlier today. They weren't real pretty. Pat Surtain wasn't even in the top 10 for corners. Justin Simmons was 4th at free safety. So it's good that the bumps from the fellow players and the coaches got the 2 best players in the Broncos secondary over the top to get them in as starters. Justin Simmons, Pat Surtain, well-deserved for a defense that really, turned this thing around after the 1-5 start. And then for Mims, yeah, you're talking about it, the punt return, the kick return. We know that in Denver. I didn't think people knew that around the country. Relatively anonymous rookie, not getting a lot of snaps on the offense. Caught 1 or 2 long passes this year, but Marvin Mims has not become a household name, so for him to become a starter in that kick returner, punt returner position means, again, the fellow players, the coaches did their homework in the voting. They know Marvin Mims is dynamic. They know he's putting up numbers that are really, really well respected. Again, in a year they're not going to make the playoffs. I don't have the number in front of me. You're the historian. You might know it. This has got to be the most Pro Bowlers the Broncos have had in years.
I have to go back and actually take a look at the list. It's certainly not the most Pro Bowlers they've had in non-playoff year, because I can recall, I believe it was 2001 when they went 8-8. They had a bunch.
Well, I'm saying in years, as in, I'm thinking this is probably the most since the year after Super Bowl 50. I mean, it felt like every year we're talking about one guy getting the nod.
Yeah, like 1 year Pat Surtain, 1 year Justin Simmons. I'd have to go back and look that up. Now, 2019, that was, I know it was Courtland Sutton that year, so.
I think you're kind of making my point in the sense of neither of us can rattle off the top of our head in the last 6-7 years when they've had 3 Pro Bowlers. So especially 3 starters. A nod of respect to the Broncos. Mm-hmm. Again, if you're just joining the show, Marvin Mims, Justin Simmons, Pat Surtain II, all named starters for the Pro Bowl. Little bit of a consolation prize in another lost non-playoff season. You got any final thoughts on this, or do you want to move on to what we learned today?
I mean, I'll tell you, with Marvin Mims, really good for him to see him recognized. I mean, because what we've seen over the course of the year, teams have really tried to kick away from him.
There's respect there.
He has, and this is another thing that goes into the voting. If you're on special teams and you're preparing for the Broncos, a huge amount of the conversation is about Marvin Mims Jr. and making sure he doesn't have the opportunity for a breakaway.
Sure.
And so when you have players voting as a huge part of special teams or the Pro Bowl voting, that's going to sit with players in the vote. So actually, to me, it really makes a lot of sense that Mims is going to be the returner for the AFC, because he is that kind of breakaway threat. And oh, by the way, it doesn't hurt that one of his big explosive returns in a week that he earned Special Teams Player of the Week honors, it came on Monday Night Football. Everyone was watching that
was a
Bills
big stage
game. So those two things mean, frankly, I wasn't surprised that Marvin Mims Jr. made the Pro Bowl. I figured it would be Surtain, Mims, and then Simmons. Some years he's on, some years he's not. So it can kind of be tricky, but yeah, it's a good solid output. And oh, by the way, how much did the Broncos put into special teams this offseason, right? Having a core special teamer become a Pro Bowler, that's going to make Mike Westhoff and Ben Katwika and even Sean Payton as well feel pretty good, because that was an area where they did generate an awful lot of improvement.
I mean, the list of Pro Bowlers in 2022, Mace, a year ago, believe it was just Bradley Chubb. He was the only one, and he got traded, obviously. So
Surtain made it last season.
Okay, excuse me. In 2020, yes, in 2020, my bad. I'm seeing Bradley Chubb. Point being, they don't have 3 Pro Bowl starters in a long, long time.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal. It shows marked improvement under Sean Payton. And frankly, it shows a little more respect around the league that we're not sitting here really talking about snubs. Again, would we all like to see Miners get it? Yeah. But Miners isn't really a household name. Maybe some people want to toss around like an Alex Singleton because he's a tackling machine. Okay, but not really a household name. Their 2 household names in Simmons and Surtain made it, and their rookie, who's putting up some phenomenal numbers, also got the returning gig. Feels like the Broncos didn't get disrespected tonight.
They didn't get disrespected. The other thing I would say also on Quinn Miners, usually for offensive linemen, the recognition comes a year later. This is the year when Quinn Miners really emerged as one of the best guards, which, it's just in time for him, because if he has another year like this, that dude's going to get paid. Mm-hmm. I think any long-term planning for the Broncos involves Quinn Miners getting paid. So it doesn't surprise me that he's playing at a Pro Bowl level this year, but the recognition isn't there yet. I would not be surprised if we're talking about Quinn Miners being a Pro Bowl selection after next season.
All right, let's move on to today's news, and that was Sean Payton, Jarrett Stidham, meeting with the media, talking about this upcoming Raiders game. I had a couple of takeaways, and I want to get to your Garett Bolles stuff in a little bit too, because that was pretty interesting, pretty fun in the locker room. Let's start with QB and head coach, though. And my biggest QB was Jarrett Stidham, or my biggest takeaway was QB Jarrett Stidham said he doesn't feel like he's auditioning for the job. And I want to know, is that just a guy at the podium who's not trying to say the wrong thing and not trying to make the coaches think, oh, I want to be your guy in 2024, and I'm going to go out there and press on Sunday and throw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns so you make me the starter next year, week 1? Or is that a guy who truly doesn't think he's not auditioning for the QB job and he may or may not have a pretty good shot at it? It just felt like a funny quote. To me, it's kind of the definition of an audition, Mace.
Yeah, I think he's just trying to focus on the here and now when he says that, of starting this game, and not get too caught up in the ramifications of it. That's what I heard when he said that.
But if you went and had a beer with Jarrett Stidham, would True Serum get Jarrett Stidham to admit this is very clearly an audition? What else could it possibly be?
I think he'd absolutely know that. I think if he gave him the Truth Serum, he'd say that, but he's not going to say that on the record. But look, everyone knows what this is. Everyone knows what the outlook is right now. And I'm sure he knows it as well. But I think he also understands that one game isn't necessarily going to change whatever the Broncos' decision is on the quarterback position, right? Are they going to draft a quarterback early? Is that going to change based on a Week 18 game against another team that is eliminated from playoff consideration like the Raiders? Probably not.
Okay, but then let me ask you this. As we sit here today on January 3rd, 2024, what are the odds Jarrett Stidham's the starter in week 1? Because there was a Peter King report that sort of made the rounds on the internet today that he thinks Stidham has a real shot at it. I tend to disagree. You're in that locker room every day. You're our senior Broncos writer and insider. If you had to put a percentage on Jarrett Stidham being the starter week 1, 2024, it would be
50%.
Wow. So then I would push back on you that maybe week 18 does matter a little bit.
Yeah, but I think part of that 50% is starter as a bridge to a young quarterback.
So you're saying either handed the job or, hey, you're the starter, but Jaden Daniels over there on the bench.
I think that's the most likely type of scenario, that he is starting while name your quarterback, Jaden Daniels. If you really went audacious with a trade up, Caleb Williams or Drake May. If you chose to stand pat, Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix, maybe J.J. McCarthy, although I think McCarthy's probably the least of those quarterbacks. I think if I were predicting a scenario right now, it would be Jarrett Stidham as a bridge to a young quarterback. And that means he'd be starting week 1.
And that does mean he'd be starting week 1. You mentioned all 6 of the draftable guys there. You know, the more pipe dream if you get crazy in a trade, Williams or May, probably Daniels. Penix could fall to you. McCarthy, maybe a little further back. Nix could be right in your range. Out of those 6 guys, and we have months and months to do it, so I'm not pinning you down by any stretch.
This is going to be the number one topic of discussion on this station for the next 3.5 months.
It absolutely is. So I'm not pinning you down. I'm not pinning you down by any stretch. But is there one of the 6? Let's just live in fantasy land, and I assume, but I don't know. The answer would be Caleb Williams. But is there one of the 6 that you're like, if you can get him, you got to do it?
I think Drake May would run Sean Payton's offense exceptionally well.
Interesting. I was just on with Phil like half hour ago, and he doesn't like Drake May at all, and that's what makes this type of time of the year fun.
I think when you're talking about the range of throws that he has, he reminds me of Justin Herbert. I think Michael Penix Jr. would be right there with Drake May if not for the injury history. Let's be clear on this. The reason why we're not talking about Michael Penix Jr. being in the Williams-May conversation is the injury history.
Yeah, 2 ACLs, correct?
2 ACLs, and so both ACLs, so both knees, and both shoulders. Injuries to both shoulders.
And this is his 6th year in college.
Yeah. I think the 6th year has much less impact than the injuries. So this is why I said this.
I just mean wear and tear. I mean, he's done this for a while.
Right. I mean, and that's why I said a couple of nights ago during the Sugar Bowl, as well as Michael Penix Jr. played, and he played exceptionally well. But there's good tape on him going back to Indiana. I mean, he's been on radars probably since 2020 in the COVID year when the Hoosiers played the best football we've seen from that program in a long time, and Penix was the reason why. He was incredibly dynamic. What we've seen from him in the last couple of years is he has improved as a pocket passer. You watch him Monday night. That's the first time you've seen him. It may have been a revelation. But this is a guy who's got all the throws. He's got all the clubs in his bag. I made a comparison today with Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater could drop that thing in a bucket, right? He was a rhythm and timing passer, but he could also anticipate the breaks a receiver makes and get there and have it and drop a dime downfield. He did that to Jerry Jeudy a lot in practice. Did it even in that regular season opener in 2021. But Teddy, remember how he struggled in the red zone?
Oh, yeah.
Very well. And it was because he did not have the fastball.
Correct. And Teddy also had suffered a gruesome leg injury in Minnesota, which I always think of Teddy before that injury and Teddy after that injury.
Yeah, but Teddy, when he was here, didn't have the fastball. And so that's why they'd have red zone periods. Drew Lock would do better than Teddy because Drew had the howitzer. What Drew didn't have was the touch, right? Well, Michael Penix Jr. has the howitzer, and he has the touch.
He does.
And he makes full field reads, and he operates really well in the pocket. So he checks a lot of the Sean Payton boxes.
It sounds like Penix and May are your 2 favorites.
Yes, that's fair to say.
I like Penix a lot. My favorite remains Williams. I believe that's a pipe dream to get Caleb Williams, but I believe he's got some Patrick Mahomes in him. And people want to point to the USC, and they only went 7-5 this year, and he looked human at times. Whatever.
But he made some plays. I mean, it's not that
Williams was awesome.
This is not like I don't like Caleb Williams. And if they drafted Caleb Williams, I think they'd be in great shape. And I think certainly he's probably the most dynamic runner of those three. It's not that Drake May and Michael Penix Jr. can't move when the need arises. Penix clearly, with the 2 ACL injuries, doesn't have the same mobility he had if he went back to, say, 2020. Watching him with IU and watching him with UW, this is a quarterback who he's grown in the pocket, but clearly he's had to adapt to a new reality that comes with the injuries that he's had.
He had almost 0 rushing yards this year. I've looked at his stats.
Yes.
And I know he
but
loses
he has a
some
good
on kneel
feel
downs.
for the pass rush.
Right.
He can escape. He can step away from the rush. So he's got that.
But he's not that dual threat guy.
No, he's not. He once was at. You go back to 2020 and you see him diving for the pylon, making plays with his legs. He's not the same guy, but he has, to his credit, become a much better pocket passer. He's adapted to the reality of having 2 ACL injuries, and he's grown into somebody who I think projects very nicely as a pro quarterback. But again, the most important date for him in terms of his NFL prospects, it's not Monday night in the national championship against Michigan. It's late February, early March when he gets to Indianapolis at the Combine and has all the medicals.
Sure. That is either going to spook teams or make them take a deep breath and say, oh, okay, it's not as bad as we thought. We're good to spend a first-round pick on you. All right, fun little sidetrack there. Jarrett Stidham doesn't see himself auditioning. Mason and I agree. He's just saying the politically correct thing at the podium. You can read about it at denversports.com. Other takeaway from today, Sean Payton stressing the importance of ending the season with a win. Mayshaw, remember, he said this on Sunday after the Chargers game, that the 9th win meant a lot to him. He says it again today on Wednesday. But I've got to ask you this simple question because I am torn. The 9th win could be the difference between picking 11th and 12th and picking 15th and 16th. And to
even 18th.
Okay, as far as 18th.
They could go to 18.
So that's a huge range.
Yeah.
11, 18, especially if you have to get to, say, to 6 to get your guy. Do you know how much easier it is to get from 11 to 6 than 18 to 6? So I have to ask you this, Andrew Mason. Sean Payton wants to win. Should Broncos country want him to win? Because I think I'm cheering for a loss. I mean, 11 to 18, I thought it was 11 to 16. 11 to 18 is a huge gap.
Yeah, 18 takes a bunch of things happening just wrong.
And 11 takes a bunch going just right.
Yeah. They're actually looking at tiebreakers. I believe they're out of it for 9 and 10. So I think it is 11.
That's what I thought, too.
Yes.
Yeah, 11 is the absolute highest they can get.
It's a massive difference.
It's a huge swing.
Okay, let's say it's Jaden Daniels. And Jaden Daniels, let's say it requires you to get to pick 4, hypothetically speaking.
11 to 4 is doable. 18 to 4 is not.
18 to 4 is doable, but then you're talking about sacrificing some player capital. I mean, I would say this. The best case scenario roster building wise, and this is one reason why I think maybe you zero in on Penix is or Bonix, Penix or Bonix. I think one of the reasons why you may zero in on them is neither of them require sacrificing Pat Surtain, who is again a Pro Bowler and is a Pro Bowl starter and was an All-Pro last year. Is this team better? Let's even live in the hypothetical of, they move up to 2 for, say, Drake May. Is this team better with Michael Penix and Pat Surtain?
Yes.
Or is it better with Caleb Williams or Drake May, but no Surtain? Oh, by the way, you're sacrificing more draft capital because you moved down. Because 18 to even 4 is going to cost. I mean, you're probably talking about losing Surtain, and Pat Surtain's value is probably Jalen Ramsey's value when he was traded 2 first-round picks.
It's a great question, and I think both Williams and May have the opportunity to be generational stars. I've said it before, I think Williams can be Patrick Mahomes 2.0. So if that pans out that way, then yeah, I think you'd be better with Williams and no Pat Surtain than you would with Penix and PS2. But it has to pan out in a very specific way for that to be the case. So I think what you're getting at here, it is much better if the Broncos lose this weekend and can keep their options in the draft significantly more wide open.
It would be better long-term to lose this game, but the thing is you have players who are going to go out there and try to do their best.
And you can't tell them not to. You can't
Nobody wants to put bad film out there.
Right.
Will.
You can't go give them a pregame speech and say, hey, guys, We really need to pick 11 and not as low as 18, so why don't you guys go suck today? You just can't do that.
I mean, New England could have used a loss to the Broncos on Christmas Eve, right?
They may have blown the number 2 pick with that win.
Yeah, they got a little lucky with results that went elsewhere this past Sunday, like Arizona. Arizona upsetting Philadelphia, really. But again, there's another example, right? The Cardinals go into Philly and stun the Eagles.
Yeah.
Okay? It's one of the best things about the NFL
Any given
is
Sunday.
that any given Sunday, and you see teams that are out of it that play earnestly and with fervor and fire, and a lot of that motivation is from within the players. Again, nobody wants to put bad film out there. Every player knows every snap counts in the evaluation and what they can do in this game.
And there's 2 things on the line, and there is, and we would be silly to ignore both of them. It's the first winning season since 2016, the year after Super Bowl 50.
And every player is saying that matters.
Yeah, to go 9-8 and just say, hey, 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, we couldn't accomplish this, and we did it in 23. So like you said, every player says that matters. You're in the locker room every day. And also, you broke your losing streak to the Chiefs, but all of a sudden your losing streak to the Raiders is climbing up. That would be a nice one to get the monkey off the back of, hey, we had the winning record, we broke the streak to the Chiefs, and we also broke the streak to the Raiders. Mm-hmm. You can't deny there's 2 significant things on the line this weekend.
Yeah, and imagine if you're looking at the end of the year and you snap the Chiefs streak, you snap the Raiders streak, you snap the streak of losing seasons. It's not all you wanted. You wanted to snap the streak of playoff seasons, of non-playoff seasons, I should say. But that, and oh, by the way, you got your first sweep over the Chargers since I believe was 2015.
Been a minute for sure. Probably
Yes.
since the Super Bowl year, yeah.
Yeah. You can look at that year and say, hey, in a lot of ways, we stopped the bleeding around here. The bleeding been going on for 6-7 years, and we put a halt to it.
Perhaps, but then you also sort of reopened the wound by not answering the quarterback question.
Right.
So you kind of
saying-
stopped it, but you kind of didn't
Yeah.
tape it up all the way because now you got to go address the QB position, the biggest position in all of sports.
Right. And you may have to address that position by sacrificing draft capital, which you're really going to need if you're putting together a roster the next couple of years with an $85 million dead cap charge over 1 or 2 years, depending on how the Broncos do the accounting on it, in front of you. There you go.
It would be nice to beat Las Vegas for the 2 reasons: to get the winning record and to end the 7-game losing streak. But I think you and I are on the same page. Ultimately, if they walk off the field losers on Sunday, that ain't a bad thing when it comes to maybe, perhaps a 7-pick difference in where their first-round selection falls.
I mean, we were going over this hypothetical in the media room today at Sanctuary Hill Training Center. Say the Broncos lose and the Vikings are there. Maybe the Broncos and Vikings or whoever are tied for the same spot, and they're tied on strength of schedule tiebreaker. What if the Broncos go into a draft pick coin flip with a team that's also looking at a quarterback, and you lose that coin flip? I mean,
it'd just be a killer. It would just be a devastator.
Total kick in the you-know-what.
Yeah. No, let's hope that's not the case. And let's hope we can either feel good about ending everything to the Raiders or feel good about talking come as early as next Monday, a pick that feels realistic to get finally the answer at quarterback. Coming up on the other side, Andrew Mason had a really interesting interaction with Garett Bolles in the locker room today. We'll give you the audio next.